Stephanie Odie here with Heavy. I'm joined by ESPN NFL Nation's Jenna Laine. Thank you so much for joining me. We're talking Bucs, but we had breaking news this week. Antonio Brown and Mike Edwards on suspension when a time that we really need down the stretch. What's the impact it has with Antonio Brown in particular? Because what's his future looking like for the future with the Bucs? I know Bruce Arians was a huge fan of him going into Tampa. So what are the implications there?
Well, it's interesting, Stephanie, because when Bruce Arians, who had some history with Antonio, they were together in Pittsburgh. When Antonio came to Tampa Bay, which originally he said he wasn't a fit for their locker room, but then he ultimately relented. They signed him, but he made it very clear. He said there will be no second chances. And he said one screw up and you're done. And lo and behold, this is a pretty significant screw up. I mean, we're talking about a federal crime here. I know some folks have made some comments about the NFL's rules when it comes to vaccination cards. I've also seen some people try to compare the situation to Aaron Rodgers. But keep in mind, Aaron Rodgers did not misrepresent his vaccination status to the NFL. That's the key. He did not misrepresent his status to his team. He did not provide a fake vaccination card. Okay, that's what Antonio did, which is literally a federal crime. Same thing with Mike Edwards, same thing with John Franklin III, who's no longer with the team. So that's pretty significant. A lot of people are saying, why can't the Bucs just cut him now? He is injured, and Arians said that he is going to basically treat this, same with Edwards, like they're injured players, and he will address their futures with the team when they come back from their suspensions. But one thing I would say is that because Antonio Brown, I was looking at his contract earlier, he does have a signing bonus. I could see a scenario where, say the Bucs don't want to keep him anymore. Instead of cutting him right now, they could theoretically try to get back 3/17 of his signing bonus, essentially, because they would miss those 3 games. Or they cut him, they could actually get 6/17 of it. So I could see a scenario where they do that. But what I think is really interesting is what you're going to see here is just how much power and control does Tom Brady have over the team. Because we know he loves Antonio Brown. We know he's willing to go to bat for him. He is a mentor to Antonio. He's a guy that he trusts, and he's a damn good football player. No matter, I mean, off the field stuff aside, he's a damn good football player, even though he's been injured this year. And I know he's a guy that Tom would really want down the stretch. So we're going to see how much control he has over this football team because, you know, he's come to Tampa and Tampa has basically catered to all of his needs, given him all kinds of players that he's want to bring in, you know, Rob Gronkowski, Leonard, Fournette, absolutely. And Tom is having a brilliant season. But I think it's going to be really interesting here, though, to ultimately see you know, whether in fact they're able to keep him or not. He certainly makes them a better football club, but I mean, how many chances is this guy ultimately going to get?
Yeah, when it comes to Tom Brady, happy wife, happy life, happy quarterback, happy life in Tampa Bay. Another great player he brought on board, Gronkowski, who had his second back-to-back 100-yard game, first time in 5 years. What's it like having Gronkowski and Tom Brady together? Gronk just said, hey, I think Tom Brady knows what I'm thinking before I even think it. The two just mesh well together, and having him in there, how is it helping with the team right now, and especially with having him healthy and things like that?
Well, I think it's great anytime you have Gronk around because he is like a human golden retriever. And Tom gets really intense. We've seen it on the sidelines. And I think that it's kind of like my sister and her husband. They are a perfect balance for each other, their personalities. Now, don't get me wrong. When it comes time to work, Gronk will absolutely work. But he has this very fun-loving personality while he's doing it. Like, he gets intense, but he's not necessarily showing it on his face. He's out there and he's laughing and he's just truly enjoying himself. And I think it helps Tom a lot. I think it helps him stay present. I think it helps him, you know, kind of remember to enjoy and embrace the moment. And so I think they really balance each other out from a personality standpoint, but also Gronk is his ride or die. Mm-hmm. And with Tom, it's all about who can I trust. That was what he talked about last year when he got to Tampa Bay. We need to see who we can trust, who I can trust down the stretch. And Tom is also a guy that benefits so much from repetition. He wants those reps. It's crazy. You watch him in training camp. You think he's going to maybe take a few reps off, give, you know, Blaine Gabbert some time, give Ryan Griffin some time, give the rookie Kyle Trask some reps. But no, Tom wants them all because he just feels like they're so important. This is a guy that he's gotten reps with on the biggest stage and has come through for him on the biggest stage. 2 tutties in the Super Bowl. Then he followed that up with 2 more touchdowns to open up the season. And so there's just such a strong trust factor. And Gronk is truly a jack of all trades. And so, he can pass protect like crazy. He's a run blocker, and that guy can still get vertical, and he's still so difficult to bring down. And watching him against the Colts this past week, and this is a guy just a couple games removed from coming back from cracked ribs and a punctured lung, and he's just playing lights out. It's been fun to watch him down the stretch. This is a completely different offense when he's out there on the field.
Another big impact on the offense, especially in that Colts game. 4 touchdowns from Leonard Fournette. Having him in there, you talk about him, Lenny, great guy. He was even questioning whether he wanted to stay in Tampa last year. Having him here, also contributing as a big impact player in this offense. What's it like having him back there and staying in Tampa for the season?
It's crazy because this whole roster, it's like, especially when then they bring in Richard Sherman, it's like this is a fantasy squad from a couple years ago. But it's been great seeing Fournette out there because we know how much Brady relies on the running back, especially in the passing game. And Fournette had a little bit of an adjustment last year. He had to learn to kind of play second fiddle to Ronald Jones. That was very difficult for him. At one point, he got off a plane and just tearfully told Bruce Arians that he was done. He couldn't do this anymore. And they had another tearful conversation in Arians' office, and Arians said, "I need to know if you're in or not." And he had to trust Arians that ultimately he would get an opportunity. And he got that opportunity in the playoffs. It's crazy how fate kind of happened. I mean, Tom Brady knows all about that. That's how he get his opportunity, poor Drew Bledsoe. But, Ronald Jones, he suffered fractured finger, and he also got COVID, and then he had a thigh injury in the postseason. And that was when we saw playoff Lenny emerge towards the end of the season, and then he really kicked it into high gear in the postseason. And the Bucs really hadn't maintained a commitment to the ground game, I think, until that later stretch of the season. So it was a perfect time for Fournette. And I think why we're seeing even more of him now, it's interesting because usually Bruce Arians prefers the by committee approach. But very clearly, Fournette is the guy that Brady trusts. I mentioned that earlier. He likes the guy that he can trust. That is a guy he knows he can trust. And that's as a pass protector, that's as a pass catcher. He did have a drop against Indianapolis, but overall, that's a guy that just has such big play ability. Plus, teams are more likely going to want to stack the box against him, and so it's going to give him some opportunities downfield. But one of the things that we've seen so much more this year is that teams line up against the Bucs. So much two deep safety stuff. Third most in the league of facing two deep safeties. The easiest way to combat that, teams are trying to take away Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Rob Gronkowski down the field. The easiest way to combat that is by running the football. So they are going to feed Lenny. And you look at the number of touches that he has, and he leads the team in scrimmage yards. He is 975 yards from scrimmage. He is closing in on 1,000 yards, and that's both rushing and receiving. That is more than any other player. That's more than Mike Evans. That's more than Chris Godwin. So he's having a fantastic year, and that's going to continue the more teams are adamant about trying to stop that downfield passing attack.
Yeah, the Bucs are clearly the team to beat this season, but you cover them during the struggles as well early on. You've had so much experience in Tampa, but they had the long route to the Super Bowl last year. They didn't win the NFC South, had to go through the wild card. This year would be the first time they won since 2007. It's looking good, but when you're looking down the stretch, any concerns there when you're looking at the schedule ahead with these divisional matchups, Atlanta tomorrow, anything that can concern you with the Bucs and their future ahead?
Well, as much as we talked about Antonio Brown and the impact of his suspension, Mike Edwards, even though he's not a starter, he's the only safety that has seen action in every single game. He's not listed as a starter, but the guy has had a ton of reps, not only as a safety, but also as a big nickel. Todd Bowles likes to bring in sometimes an extra safety in there, have 3 safeties on the field. And that was very valuable when Sean Murphy-Bunting was still recovering from his elbow dislocation. He was out for quite a while. He just came back recently. So not having him out there, and now they're not going to have Jordan Whitehead. He suffered a calf injury on Thursday. That's going to be huge. And then, of course, facing a team like Atlanta, Kyle Pitts. If I'm calling plays for the Falcons, and the thing is he gets vertical more than any other tight end, almost more than any other tight end in the league. And he's also a unicorn. And you truly can. We talked about Gronk lining up everywhere. He's one of those guys that truly, they line him up wide more than any other tight end. They're going to attack that portion of the field. And I have concerns there. I still think the Bucs will come away with a win. But as far as the rest of the schedule, look, New Orleans clearly has quarterback problems, right? We saw that from Taysom Hill. Trevor Siemian has not been able to replicate the magic that he had when he stepped in for Jameis Winston. But still, Trevor Siemian is the one that got the win over the Buccaneers when he stepped in for Jameis Winston. And the New Orleans Saints have had the Buccaneers number. Even the year that they won the Super Bowl, the last Super Bowl in 2002. Yeah, and the Saints swept them that year. And so for whatever reason, granted that was a different coach, different team then, but, they've only got one win. Tom Brady only has one win in Tampa over Sean Payton and the Saints. And that came in that NFC divisional game. And that was when, at that point, Drew Brees had no downfield playability. So I still think that, especially given the beatdown during the regular season that the Bucs had against the Saints, that's still going to be a really tough game. And then, of course, they're going to have Buffalo as well. And, I know that Buffalo had a loss to Jacksonville, so they had some fluky moments. They kind of started off the season so hot, and then they kind of got to crawling at a snail's pace. Where is this offense that was putting 30+ points a game? But I think they're getting it together, and I think they're going to pose a big challenge for the Bucs. But the Bucs are going to be facing them at home, and they have shown they are a completely different ball club at home. That offense is so different when they're playing at home. So, and that's another reason why they're definitely going to want to vie for that home field advantage. They're not going to want to have to do what they did last year, which was made a lot easier when you're playing in these opposing stadiums and there are no fans, or there are limited numbers of fans like what we saw in Green Bay in the NFC Championship.
That's a big point. I bet the Tampa Bay fan base has skyrocketed since getting Tom Brady. I know your job changed a lot. Catch her on SportsCenter almost every single week talking Bucs. Catch Jenna Laine. But I do want to finish with, what was the vibe like getting him? I remember texting you being like, things are about to blow up for you. Then you get Gronk. You were there the whole time. But what was the dynamic shift once you had all this star power coming to Tampa?
I'll tell you what, it came at a really weird time because so many of my colleagues, with the sports world shutting down, there was so much uncertainty about our jobs. And I honestly felt guilty because I'm standing out there. I think I'm the only reporter in the field, and Tom hadn't even signed yet, but we knew that he was inside the building. Or no, I don't think he had actually arrived yet. He may have arrived. I think he was in the building. And it was a guilty feeling. I mean, I'm being totally honest here. It was also, there's a hospital and I tell this to people, there's a hospital right across the street, St. Joseph's. It's one of the big hospitals in Tampa. And given that my sister's a nurse, I knew the challenges that our healthcare workers were facing right then and there. And it was a very guilty feeling because yes, I had to deal with inconveniences. In order to use the restroom, I had to go off site because they weren't letting anybody in the building because of COVID. Everything was shut down. So I had to go to the Panera, and it was
car air conditioning.
Yeah. And it's those are such minor inconveniences compared to the folks working in these hospitals that are have all this PPE, which if they were lucky enough to have all of it, because some didn't, and they're literally trying to save these lives, and it was really hard because you just feel guilty because you just know what they're going through. And then it's my job is so easy compared to that. And I know people are like, wait a second, you cover Tom Brady. You don't sleep, you don't eat. But even so, though, our healthcare workers, they have to go through so much more. I mean, they're not drinking water. They're not eating. They're coming in on days when they don't feel like it, when they don't feel on. We know what it's like when we're on TV and we don't feel on. They don't get to have bad days. And that's the thing that it's just, I think that's what kind of, it was this wonderful thing that Tom came because, it obviously brought a lot more excitement to the franchise and everything. But it also, at the same time, makes you feel like, wow, I have it so good compared to what these other people. But it's also interesting, too, because I had a number of healthcare workers reach out and tell me, and I would tell them, my job feels so insignificant compared to yours. And they would say, no, you're our distraction. But I have to say the best part of last year was it wasn't covering the Super Bowl itself. It was being able to bring my sister to work with me. And which is the only time I'd ever get to do that. Yes. And knowing that there were 22,000 healthcare workers and other fans that were in the stadium, knowing everything that she went through, that there were countless. The thing is her story is one of thousands of millions of healthcare workers. And knowing that stadium was filled with so many people just like her, and knowing that they could feel that joy. Yeah. And she had the time of her life. She had better seats than I did. Literally, she sent me a picture of her smartwatch, and her heart rate was 154 when Devin White had his interception. That's her favorite player. And I was like, girl, you need to chill out. You're going to give yourself a heart attack. Like, she lost her mind. Like, she was right there up close with the Weeknd, like, during the halftime show. I had such a hard time focusing because I felt her joy so much. Yeah. So I think, honestly, the best part of last year was the fact that, you know, and just the fact that, you know, yes, they won the Super Bowl and stuff, but it was the most beautiful thing was the fact that our local healthcare workers and healthcare workers from all over the country, because, you know, like the Patriots, Robert Kraft, which I thought that was amazing. He like literally sent a plane full of healthcare workers. I thought it was just such a beautiful thing that these people, the most selfless people on the planet, were honored in such a beautiful way. So I know that was a really long and drawn out answer, but that's just full transparency here. I really hope the NFL continues to do more things like that because, you know, whether it's honoring our healthcare workers or our teachers, you know, like our first responders, just because military, obviously, because, you know, those are the people that honestly make the engine go. And we're so lucky to have them. It's like we do not deserve them.
It comes full circle. We need sports. But I am curious, you know, you talked about Tom Brady making a big impact on how the decisions are made with the executive part of the franchise. So when he came in, when decisions were being made with Bruce Arians and now with Tom Brady in the mix, what shift did you see? Was there a big difference in what kind of personnel could be part of the franchise once Tom Brady was there?
I think the big thing is just giving Tom the tools he needed to succeed. You know, Jason Light had a previous relationship with Tom. They were in New England together, the Bucs general manager. And so, you know, he already had a feel for the things that he would like, but you want to be able to give him all the tools that he needs to succeed. And it's obviously, you know, they couldn't, especially with the pandemic, they could not tailor this offense to Tom. It was really, especially in the early part of the season last year, the first half of the season, it really wasn't until their bye week, which is week 13, it was Tom Brady running Bruce Arians' offense. After that bye week, it finally felt like this is Tom Brady's offense. And it wasn't New England and it wasn't necessarily Tampa. But the reason why was because, like, you can't teach this whole squad of players this entire Tom's playbook. You can't teach them all of that. So they couldn't even meet in the middle just because, again, they didn't have an off season together. And so what they tried to do as much as they could is how can we make this more comfortable for him, especially because, I mean, he's speaking a new language suddenly. And so they were able to bring in Gronk. They were able to bring in Leonard Fournette, which, granted, they had never played together before, but they had a relationship together because of Under Armour. And you know, Tom does have a lot of friendships throughout the league. And obviously he's well-liked, well-respected, you know. So that definitely helped him. But, you know, a lot of the talk about Brady, and I didn't cover him in New England, but was the fact that he wasn't necessarily getting the personnel support that he needed. And this is a guy that would repeatedly take less money to try to help people around him. Now, granted, he got a heck of a defense, and that defense is still terrific in New England. But, you know, he did not necessarily have the receiving targets. He certainly didn't have the receiving targets that he has now. You know, he's got true bona fide, like, blue chip guys that can kind of help carry things if the arm talent ever starts to wane. So they've done a lot of things to ensure he has the support that he feels he needs. The situation with Alex Guerrero, obviously it was a source of some you know, lack of content in New England, but in Tampa, I mean, Bruce Arians has no problem with players seeing Guerrero. His wife even went to TB12 when, you know, she was having some issues. And so it's, you know, Alex Guerrero has full access to the facility. You know, he's out at practice. There just isn't that any sort of friction or tension or anything like that. So, but it's really going to be interesting to see what happens with Antonio Brown because, and so many people are like, why does Tom, who has this clean-cut reputation, and yes, I know, you know, obviously, you know, he was accused of, you know, doctoring some footballs and Deflategate and things like that. But still, his reputation has been pretty solid, and he's very well liked and respected. If there are people that don't like him, it's generally because he's a winner and he wins everything. And the guy just seems to be living life like just he's doing it on a totally different level than the rest of us mere mortals. But that's usually, I mean, his reputation has pretty much been there. But you know, Antonio Brown has obviously had a lot of off-the-field issues. And I've even asked Tom before, like, what is it about you guys? And you know, Derek Brooks and Warren Sapp had a very unlikely friendship, too. And I remember they said it's really nobody's business but, you know, ours and God's, or something to that effect. But, you know, Tom recognizes that he grew up very, very differently than Antonio did and a lot of people did. And so he also feels like he had a lot more mentors when he was coming into the league, and that really helped him along when he was the new guy. Guys in New England, whether it's like the Teddy Bruschi's or just definitely, and Willie McGinnis, just guys really, Drew Bledsoe even, like Drew Bledsoe helped him, and granted he took Drew's job, but Drew never shied away from the fact that was very disappointing for him, but he loves Tom, and Tom told me, he's like, man, he's a lifelong friend of his and a lifelong friend of his family's. But Tom recognizes maybe not everybody has had that kind of mentorship, and so he just feels like, Antonio didn't necessarily get the type of support he did growing up, and so Tom doesn't necessarily have a lot of time to be able to, be doing like a traditional mentor where he's, especially for the guys not on his team, where he's calling him up. Right. But Tom's idea of making a positive impact on someone's life is by being together, coming together as a football team, and winning a championship, and adopting like winning principles and developing winning habits. That's his way of mentorship. So if you are around him and you're sharing meeting rooms with him and you're in the huddle with him, that's his way of mentoring you, right? Like he doesn't. If you're on another team, it's really hard to do that. But if you're working with him daily, that's honestly like kind of his greatest expression of love to his teammates. He talked about that. He's like, I really love seeing my teammates succeed.
He's certainly helping his team this season. They are the Super Bowl favorites. Will we get a matchup between the Chiefs and the Bucs? We shall see. Catch Jenna Laine. Also, stay tuned for the Antonio Brown updates. She's got you covered on ESPN. Where else can we find you?
Jenna Laine, ESPN, on Twitter, also on Instagram. I don't post on Instagram as much, but I've been told by you and others that I need to post on there a little bit more frequently. So I'm always posting on my story. I just need to post a little bit more on my gallery. And also on Facebook as well.
Catch her on ESPN. She will have updates. Her Twitter is always getting you all the latest news. Catch us here on Heavy. I'm Stephanie Odie, and we'll see you next time.